People who were in a coma, what the hell did you guys freak out about when you woke up? In the 90s, my great grandfather had a stroke. He was in a coma for 3 weeks, and when he woke up, he couldn't speak English. He could only speak Choctaw. He learned it when he was still a child because his family lived near a Choctaw reservation and he played with a lot of local kids. He spoke the language fluently at the time, but he had forgotten it for the life of him, and by this time he couldn't remember a single word. This went on for about 10 days, and then he woke up from a nightmare and was suddenly able to speak only English again without remembering a single Choctaw word. He could also repeat verbatim every conversation that had taken place in the room while he was in the coma. Whoa. Brains are amazing things. If I'm not mistaken, there's a guy who, after his coma, speaking Cantonese and ended up hooking up with a Chinese woman. I was in a coma for 4 days. When I woke up, everyone was talking about my baby. I had lost my long-term memory and didn't even remember that I was pregnant. My son was at the children's hospital in the neonatal intensive care unit. I delivered him by cesarean section at 29 weeks. It was all related to Crohn's disease. I found out after I woke up. My colon ruptured during pregnancy. My husband said I was talking like a baby when I first came to. When I woke up, I felt very tired, and for the next few days, I was still a little anxious. I remembered one conversation my mom had with the nurse while I was out. Then a couple days later, my long-term memory came back to me, and I remembered everything up until my second surgery. My son wasn't born until my third surgery. Epic all in all. My son was what surprised me. Is your son okay? Yeah. He weighed 1 kilo, 474 grams, and now he's 18 years old and 195 centimeters tall. Thank you for asking. I was in a coma for 9 days. When I woke up, I was still on a ventilator. When I was disconnected, my body didn't remember how to breathe on its own. I literally had to relearn how to do it. It took me a few days. I had no natural sense of how long or deep to inhale, how long to hold the air, or how long to exhale. I had to direct all my concentration to my breathing. It was really scary. Edit, for all the people who were wondering how I slept. I didn't sleep for the first couple days. If I dozed off, my oxygen sensor would start beeping and wake me up, and then the nurse would yell at me across the ICU to remember to breathe. I couldn't talk because I had tubes in my nose and throat, but I remember waking up to that damn beeping once very tired. Anyway, I started concentrating on breathing again, but it really pissed me off. My nurse ran up and yelled at me to breathe. I looked at her and yelled in my absent voice, yes, BREATHING. Yeah, she must have read my lips and sensed the outrage, because she just held up her hands and said, Okay, good job, and then walked away. Overall, shared this because I've never had this opportunity before. My ability to breathe normally came back to me after a month or so. My health is fine now, so I wouldn't say it had any permanent effect on me. Well, thanks. Now I'm watching my every breath. Don't forget to blink. Asshole, you ruined the next 30 minutes of my life. My mom was in an induced coma for 3 months. When she woke up, she thought the hospital was trying to kill her. She tried to get out of bed and fell on the floor because she couldn't walk. Mostly she was scared because her legs had lost their shape. She had to relearn how to control every muscle. She couldn't speak properly at all and learned to write. After relearning, her handwriting was already different. She said she hated how perfect her hands looked. Her nails and cuticles were perfect and clean from not being used in any way. I remember trying to brush her hair after she woke up. Almost all of it fell out. She almost died every day she was in a coma. She had sepsis from diverticulitis after a botched surgery. Most of her hair grew back and she was able to walk, but she has brain damage that makes her look very groggy. She's always dizzy, but it's been 5 years now and her recovery can be called a miracle. A good friend of our family went into a coma for 6 months. Eventually, when he woke up, he was dumbfounded that his wife looked so old. He had actually lost the last 15 years from his memory. He knew he had 2 kids, but they were babies, and he didn't even know about his 3rd child. The memory never came back. He jumped from no cell phones to smartphones and laptops. Everything was new to him, stuck in the early 90s, but actually being in the 2000s. He had a lot to learn. But learning that you forget your kids' growing up moments was the hardest for him. This is the saddest story I've seen in this track. Oh my God, that's creepy. He must have felt it was punishment for something terrible. My wife was in an induced coma for 2 weeks for medical reasons. When she woke up, she had false memories. They were all based on conversations that took place in her room. For example, she thought they had flown to Washington, D.C. for treatment. While she was in a coma, my father was talking about how he had just returned from a work trip to Washington. Somehow, she overheard this while she was passed out, and her brain interpreted it to mean that SHE was the one who flew to D.C. Even after we explained to her the reality of where she was, it took days for her to come to terms with reality. My brother-in-law had a brain tumor, so he was out for a while when he was first admitted to the hospital. The nurses were of Asian descent, so when he woke up, he apologized to people for making them come to Japan to see him. My stepfather was in a coma for about 3 weeks. When he woke up, he couldn't find his teeth. We completely forgot where we put them and searched for a week. At one point, he dropped dead by the hospital sink. Out of the blue. They resuscitated him, but they couldn't figure out why he could barely breathe. Then the doctors sat us down and showed us x-rays with false teeth inside. They had forgotten to take them out when they put the tubes in his mouth, causing a blockage of air or something. So yeah, we found them. Edit, since this has raised so much interest, I thought I'd post a picture. The only one I have on my old cell phone. My wife was in a medically induced coma for 4 days. She had a reaction to a contrast dye and her heart stopped for 20 minutes. For almost 3 months, she was communicating with her long-deceased parents. She talked about them as if they were in the next room. Or she said her daughter or brother called her, but they never called. She constantly assumed her mother and father lived. It drove me crazy when I had to gently correct her many times in a day. She made up amazing tales of what people, relatives, friends, neighbors did, what they told. Realistically, creative fiction. After 3 months, she started to come around. The confabulation stopped. Things had changed. She can remember recent events, but her long-ago memories are gone. I don't know what it's like, but it must be horrible. Sometimes she cries over lost memories, but overall, she is doing very well. About 20 years ago, my cousin suffered a serious head injury after a fall. He was in his early 20s at the time. He was in a coma for almost 4 weeks. When he woke up, he discovered pretty quickly that he had an eidetic memory. He could retell any conversation word for word, and could even tell you the date and time you said something. He could also memorize images in just a few seconds. His memory is still eidetic. It's bloody annoying. Whenever he reminds me of something I've said in the past, usually something I can't even remember, I offer to smack him upside the head one more time. DKA diabetic ketoacidosis sent me into a coma. I have vague memories of being sick. My overall sense of time was just like mush. Even years later, I can't establish a proper timeline. I have flashes of memories of different doctors coming in and out of the room. Once I came out of the coma, I was still out of it. When you're on an insulin drip, doctors check your sugar every hour. I was never able to fall asleep, but the whole time I felt asleep. It's hard to describe the feeling, just a mushy, dragging time. I was in a coma for almost 6 weeks. When I woke up, I had to learn everything again. I still had most of my speech abilities, but my motor skills were terrible. I had to learn how to wipe my ass and how to go up and down stairs. It took about 3 weeks. I also lost a shit ton of weight. I was 190 centimeters tall and weighed about 65 pounds. 6 weeks. Jesus Christ. A severe head injury, after which I had an MRI with a dye I was highly allergic to. I died on the table within minutes. My nephew, 14 years old, has been in a medically induced coma for over 3 months. During this time, he lost about 30% of his body weight as his muscles atrophied. His first comment when he first saw himself was, "Did you forget to feed me?" This was incredibly hard to hear as his family sat and sobbed at his bedside the entire time he was unconscious. I was in a coma for 3 weeks, from September 2nd to September 26th, 2001. I was traveling through Pennsylvania on my way to Ithaca to meet with the head of marketing for the company I was working with at the time. I made that trip on September 2nd, 2001, and I don't remember much of what happened except what the EMTs and hospital staff told me. But the gist of it is that I was hit or run off the road by a drunk driver trying to cross 3 lanes to get to the exit ramp I was on. Basically, I was in his blind spot at the wrong time. In addition to being shit drunk, pretty much everyone here can guess what happened on September 11th, 2001. It feels like I've teleported or time traveled because 1 minute I'm driving and the next I'm smashed in blood. I'm in a hospital bed with a staple in my back and neck, airbag gas burns, an I3 in my arm, and a few other minor injuries. When I woke up, I was in a completely different world than the one I had left. Before I fell asleep, the economy was fine, the world as a whole was cool, and then I woke up. Chaos, that's all there was.